It's a nice place. It's nice to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Birgit, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy, but it's nearly 6 o'clock and they put us in the end.
Let's go. Okay, let's go. So, how does it work? Yeah. Next slide. Oh, yeah. The first, we were very, very touched about the invitation, but the first question that came, why us? You know? So, first reaction was maybe because we've been involved in the IADA, it was a long time ago.
It was the time when you either was, your first name was Birgit or Renate.
Yeah.
You did not really fit in, huh?
Yeah. There is only one Vero, sorry. So,
no.
Finally, why us? I got the answer. It's because we are the dinosaurs of the field, you know?
Yeah.
And thank you, Renate, to make us realize that.
Yeah, where is Renate actually? Where is Renate?
Well, she's here, yeah.
Where?
And for me, it's okay. I'm fine with the idea. You know, I'm working at the National Museum of Natural History in Paris, so I have all my friends next door in the paleontology gallery. They are very quiet, very nice, not very talking, I must say, but, well, what about you, Birgit?
Yeah, I mean, with a cocktail in my hand, I'm okay. But I thought, shall we show some embarrassing pictures of the former IADA board meetings, or
maybe not.
Tell some juicy stories.
I want to be invited again, so no,
okay.
skip it. Skip it. So what could we talk about? To have an idea of an old subject that is embarrassing everybody and on which we were both working.
Yeah, and Renate said she wants to either laugh or cry with our lecture.
Yeah.
So Renate, sorry, we decided you will cry.
So, what's the idea? Iron Goal Inc., of course.
Sorry for that, we know it's late, but it's the only subject we really work together. Yeah.
So, where shall we start? Yeah, Back to the Future. That's the subject of the conference. But you know, Birgit, the future is not her preference. She preferred to go back to the past.
Always.
Always, yes.
Yeah. And lesson learned. Lesson learned is also the subject of the conference. So we will focus on the lessons we learned during our research.
So,
going back to
first
the past.
slide.
So I will go back to the past, and we go back to the first Iron Go Inc. conference. Any idea when the first Iron Go Inc. conference took place? Oh, Herr.
He has nice glasses.
You hear?
Fine.
Indeed, you are right. Thank you. Yes. So, 1898, first Iron Go Inc. conference. Pater Ehrle, he was the head of the Vatican Library in that time. He invited curators of the most important manuscript collections all over Europe, and 17 of those curators actually came. The conference took place in St. Gall, and they came from 12 different countries. And I put here some of the portraits of them. And Pater Ehrle actually got the permission of the Pope, Leo X, to take some of the most precious, parts of the most precious manuscripts with him to St. Gall. And for instance, this is the second oldest manuscript of the Vatican Library, and one of the only 3 antique manuscripts that were known then with illumination. So this was really, really something very special. And those 17 men sat around the objects, and one major question they had is actually they saw that the objects are degrading. And they witnessed the history of the palimpsests, because in the beginning of the 19th century, chemicals were added to manuscripts to make palimpsests visible. But so their question was, is ink corrosion actually progressing? Is it something that will go on and go on and go on and go on? What would you think?
Good question.
Okay, next.
Next slide.
They actually more or less all agree that it's a progressing decay, except for one guy. He came from Oxford. I mean, the British are always some extra role. Okay, from the Bodleian Library in Oxford. And he said, you know, actually, with my collection, I cannot see any progress. And I made photos before. Yeah, I have some photographic documentation. I don't see change. Okay, we jumped 100 years later. We had the possibility to do artificial aging. And my colleague Han Nevel, in 1995, he wanted to simulate ink corrosion. And there were those artificial aging ovens. And he decided to put test samples into the ovens first to simulate decay, first at high temperature, 90 degrees, and 50% relative humidity, and another sample set, 90 degrees and 80% cycling to 35% relative humidity. And indeed, the objects really looked corroded, so he decided, and he published that, I can simulate ink corrosion. And there was the conclusion, ink corrosion is really a progressive chemical decay. And then I came and said, but if you're right, Han, why are the oldest manuscripts not the most decayed ones?
Here you have an example of a manuscript from the 14th century. The paper doesn't look very nice, you know, it's very smooth, it has lost a lot of sizing, but the ink is perfect. So it's not a fatality, so where?
The chemists were not really interested in that question because they believed actually very much in the progress and autocatalytic nightmare, but I was insisting, so in 2007 we had a project at the RCE together with my colleague Claire, she will present tomorrow, and my colleague Frank. And we actually, the project was on a damage prognosis of ink corrosion. And we repeated Hans' experiment with several originals. And so we aged originals at a low humidity, which is normally storage conditions, 50%. An 80 degree temperature, and another set of the same manuscript with high humidity. And what you see, next slide. So, it was actually totally the same for all manuscripts we tested. Low humidity, nearly nothing happens. The paper discolors a bit, the ink gets a little bit opaque, but that's it. If you raise the humidity, then you simulate ink corrosion. You get really something that we all know as ink corrosion.
So, your conclusion was?
Actually, what we did with this increased humidity was not to prove that ink corrosion is a chemical progress, but we measured the influence of water on the system. This is really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, there is a determinant impact of water in the ink corrosion mechanism.
And the other test we used was, or Han used, was the bursting strength. And with bursting strength, you measure the risk of mechanical decay.
So, your conclusion.
The lessons learned was, if you do this artificial aging or other testing, you have to be really, really careful what you test and how you interpret your results. That's the lesson I really learned from that experiment.
So how can we explain the damage? Sorry, there is a small mistake. How can we explain the damage? Let's start again from the story. To my opinion, it's a combination of physical and chemical mechanisms. And it first starts with physics. If you have a well-sized paper, And viscous ink, the ink makes a layer on top of the paper. There are only a few fibers that are in contact with the ink, and there is almost no ink corrosion. So almost no interaction means almost no corrosion. And this is, for instance, an example of an ink that is very, very rich in iron and it's perfect condition. At first I thought it was a carbon ink. It is an iron wool ink, very rich in iron, perfect condition. It starts with the migration of iron within the paper, because then you will have much more interaction between fibers and the ink, and you have many factors that would explain this. First, during the writing, if the paper is not sized enough, if the ink is very fluid, or if you have a very thick ink line, it will favor the penetration of the ink within the paper. But that we can do nothing about it. Second cause of damage is exposure to high humidity conditions, and Birgit showed that in artificial aging, this is typically what she pointed out. So it could be storage in a humid cellar, traveling during a rainy day. Such thing happens also during
wars.
Exactly.
If you have to really fast to get your collection out of the museum and somewhere in another storage place, or if you have fire, or if you have water flood, so water.
You never know.
It's a big risk.
And the last thing that may promote the iron gall ink degradation is humidification during a conservation treatment, because paper conservators, they use water. So what we know now, I'm sorry to say, but it has to be said, you know. And what we know now is that if you stay, that these migrations happen over 85% of humidity. But when it happens within a few hours. You don't have to wait for 2 or 3 months. Within a few hours, you have a migration, it goes very quickly. So the first advice I could have is, please, when you handle humidity on paper, stay below 80% of humidity, because and try to have a good calibrated hygrometer, because these small apparatus that can tell you many wrong things. And the second lessons that we learned during our experience on the paper on this migration is that most migrations are subtle. You can see, it's very difficult to see them at first.
But after 25 years, they're very obvious.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is typically what happens on this drawing. It's a drawing from Ingres, a very famous French painter. We are lucky to have some correspondence, and this drawing was restored in the 40s, and we are lucky to have a photo before restoration. And we know also that this paper restorer was using water bath, not to wash the drawing, but just to humidify the drawing just above the water bath. So it means more or less 100% of humidity. And today, this is how it looks like, you know. So we have a problem here, and it typically goes with what happens after the migration. Because when you have iron in the paper, you first don't see it so much, because, you know, it was not possible to give back a document like this or a drawing like this in this state of conservation, in this condition. That was not possible. It appeared within 40, 50 years. And it appeared simply because you have a migration of iron, then you have a chemistry that is taking over. It means first acidic hydrolysis, also Fenton reactions, and you have still a lot of discussions between chemists to know which mechanism is dominant, you know. But well, what remains is, it is chemistry, so it is temperature dependent. So if you lower the temperature, you may have a longer time life expectancy, sorry. What is sure is that with time, the paper will become brown and brittle.
Not always. We have old objects where the paper is not Where the paper is not really brown. You mean?
I mean, if there is a migration.
Ah, yeah, if there's migration.
If there is a migration, a halo, with time, it will become brown and brittle.
Yeah, okay.
If there is no migration, you're fine. So it's really starts with physics, then chemistry, and then browning. And the last step here, if you look at the same drawing, on the bottom part, you have some holes. And this is typically due to the fact that the paper has lost its flexibility. And we are not always aware about it because we are turning the pages or we are handling the drawing. And locally, the paper cannot flow. And that's why you have breaks and you have loss. So finally, the last mistake is handling in an inappropriate way. As a conclusion, I would say there are two rules for preserving iron gold ink manuscripts. First, keep it dry. And second, if you have damaged paper, keep it flat.
Okay.
So, lessons learned, yeah, there is some conclusion. The ink corrosion is limited to the fibers that are in contact with the ink, so no contact, no damage. So no migration, no damage. If you imagine the degradation, it occurs step by step, a little bit like somebody going down a stair, you know. Each time you have an exposure to high humidity, you have migration, and then chemistry goes on. You lose the mechanical properties, and then if you have another accident, it goes further. So, last conclusion, beware of conservation treatment using moisture or water. So what happens when you tell paper conservators that do not use water on iron gold ink? What do you think they do?
Yeah.
First?
I don't comment.
Yeah, of course.
That's what we all would love to do, huh?
Yeah, okay. And second, we know what we do because we are doing solubility testing. And that's both true and wrong.
Okay.
So what can we test?
Yeah, can we test it? We go back to the past, because there were those 17 curators sitting around the table. Some brought actually objects with them, and they were discussing, can we test it? And actually, Dr. de Vries from the University Library in Leiden, he brought an object, and he brought his test. He had the litmus test, which is a pH test, and he tested an original before. Then he put it in an alcohol solution, then in a water solution, then in an alcohol solution, and when it was dry, he tested again, and the acid was gone. So they were already aware, and they were using spot tests as we do today.
But today,
100 years later, Hanevel had developed the phytate treatment, and he wanted to test the effectivity of the phytate treatment. So he developed the batophenancholine iron 2 test. And very soon after, when I was in the laboratories, we said, hey, but we can also test iron gold inks with this test. So I developed it a little bit further so that we can apply it onto originals without damage.
So it was thought to be an identification test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But finally, it is also a solubility test, if you think about it, because we are measuring the amount of iron that goes in your testing paper. So if you see this one, you know, it means that you have iron that wants to move. Mm-hmm. It means that if you apply some humidity, you may have a nice halo around the inscription. So then Birgit went further.
Yeah, because Elisa, our speaker...
Still the same.
Yeah. Speaker before us, Elisa wrote her master thesis on developing a local repair method with remoistenable tissue, but we knew that when remoistenable includes moisture, and we just heard water is a big problem. So our question was, can we somehow tweak the test so that we can measure the amount of water we use for applying the remoistenable tissue on iron-go ink objects. So together we developed this iron-go ink test where you have Whatman paper with butterfin and Juline. You have an ink stamp with iron-go ink on top of it, and whenever water touches that test, you get a migration. So it's a wonderful test to test your own mending technique. And it was on the market brought by Claire and Elisa in practice in conservation.
But Claire and Elisa decided to stop. Okay.
Why did you do that, Claire, Elisa?
Yeah, because they changed their position, and it was not so easy to do, and I can understand after 10 years that they were tired to do that. So they made, when I asked Claire why she wanted to, how they designed their test, they said, we wanted it to be elegant, okay? It's elegant but no more available, I'm sorry. So recently I decided, because I'm a member also of French Association of Paper Conservators, the ARSAG, I decided to make the test again, so it's much less elegant, but it works anyway. And it's available, it's right now available. You have some, if you want to test them, you have some small sample here. You just have to go on the site of the ARSAG, and if you try, even if it's in French, try to find the page shop, you should understand it, and then it's possible to buy it directly there.
Lessons learned. So the lesson I learned is it's actually relatively easy to develop something, but it is really difficult to keep it on the market for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. I must say, it's, to my opinion, it's one of the best ideas that was produced in the last 20 years. And I'm a little bit jealous of Birgit, because this is an idea I should have thought of. But I didn't, I must say. So I'm happy to try to take over.
Oh, there is a copper test to be... we heard from Jasna, she wants to have a copper test, so do your best.
Okay. So, what's next? Treatments, of course. What about treatments?
Now, let's go back. 1898. Actually, these curators were split in two groups. There was one group, they said, we have to be really, really, really careful, because they saw some treatments which were not so successful, and they said, please, 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 we have to photograph everything. We really have to document the condition now. Because every treatment is a risk for the scientific interests. They could be seriously impaired by treatment side effects. And the other group was quite in favor of treating, especially Otto Posse from Saxonia. And they were discussing two different groups of treatments. They discussed the chemical stabilization already then, and because they only could measure the acid, so they were very concerned about the acid, so they talked about neutralization, and they had the gelatin formol treatment. They also talked about mechanical stabilization, and what is interesting, today we heard gold-beater skin is still a possibility which is seriously thought about. They talked about gelatin, silking with starch, which was done by Hugo Ibscher in the 20th century, in the early 20th century, all over Europe. And they talked about saponlac, which is cellulose nitrate, and the Saxonian people developed that method further. And we have also some objects in Germany treated with that method. And they were discussing side effects as well. Yeah. 100 years later, there was a new method, so my colleague Han Nevel developed the phytate treatment, and that was actually when I came into the picture. They asked me if I could, as a paper conservator, develop that further so that it's applicable in paper conservation studios. I did, so we came up with the calcium phytate and calcium bicarbonate method.
So the paradox about the phytate treatment, it has been extensively studied by all the laboratories all over Europe and even over the Atlantic Ocean. So everybody agrees about its efficiency. But there is a big paradox. It's a water-based treatment, and you have to immerse the documents. And when you see the demonstration of Birgit she made at our laboratory in 2005, you see at least 4 or 5 baths. Now, 2 is enough usually, but
no.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Wash, wash, wash,
wash, wash, wash. And the most damaged documents such as this one, nobody dared to use such a treatment on this document that would need stabilization. So we decided to cope this problem, and I was working with paper conservators to try to identify when was the major risk of mechanical degradation during the treatment. And we finally came to a protocol that takes time. It necessitates some skills, I must say, but it's possible, and I'm showing just an example. Even if it looks like a piece of lace like this one, you know, I just make a zoom of a very damaged area before and after free bath. And finally, we proved that it was possible to treat such document, although it is time-consuming. It is not a treatment that you will do very quickly, but it's possible. And the main drawback is the color change, because the paper, it's the problem not of phytate, but it's the problem of water. You're washing the paper, and also the chemical stabilization doesn't mean that you're reinforcing the paper. It's still very brittle, very difficult to handle, so you still need some consolidation. And when we talk about consolidation, then we come to adhesives. So 100 years later, what do we do? The phytate treatment, we don't use it so much. I have the feeling of that. But paper conservators, they do a lot of mending. They do a lot of lining. And the question that naturally comes is which adhesives to use. And here, I have to say, I'm neutral. I don't want to take part for one adhesives, because I know that this is a very personal question, because it deals really with the way you're practicing your job. But what we have to say in case of iron gold ink, the main problem of the adhesive is the solvent. And it depends. There are 2 scenarios. If the paper has been washed, the ink, there is no problem of ink solubility, because what wanted to go has gone in the solution. So the solvent is not a problem. You can choose whatever you want as an adhesive. I know that some have preferences, but I'm not going to enter into this debate. But if the paper is not washed, here you have to be aware about the risk of migration. And here we come back to the testing the protocol with this mending test that is available. And often the question comes, well, shall I choose between gelatine or Klucel, because gelatin is water, Klucel is ethanol, one is very strong, so it adheres better, but the other is easier to remove. It's a matter, I'm not going to
Another
tell.
lecture.
But the migration test is very useful for that. So let's come to these very damaged documents. And yesterday, I had in mind to have some selections of some pictures of more or less damaged documents, and that we could make some adverts, advice, sorry, Birgit and I. But we're discussing, the thing is that I wanted to treat, and she didn't want. So we had a problem because we didn't agree on many of them.
Yeah.
And I said, well, on this kind, it's possible. Let's go for it. And she said, well, it depends, and so on. And I realized it is typically the difference between a physical chemist as I and a paper conservator, but more art historian now, as she is that I'm thinking in terms of feasibility, efficiency, stabilization. This is one point. And it's very different from what is the best to do. In between, you have all the context of the document, the history, the value, and the feasibility, in terms of money, of means, and so on. And it so much depends on the context that it's difficult to say. So if you are confronted to these iron gold ink degradation papers, it's important to discuss with people around you to try to make your own opinion. That's the only advice I could give.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we agreed is don't use phytates on documents that are not damaged or not that much damage. If you can make some local mending, do it, and don't treat systematically. It's not a preventive treatment.
Yeah, I guess that few people will treat with phytate. It's you have to buy phytate. It's expensive. You can't. Not every studio can buy it. It's difficult to prepare and so on. So anyway, I think it's quite a very specific method. Yeah.
So the global tendency is do the minimum. It doesn't mean do less. It means less work per items, and more work on the whole collection. So it means also, and you all know that already, more preventive conservation. And when talking about preventive conservation, there's a thing that I told, it's if you lower the temperature, you will improve you will slow down all this chemistry that takes place. So you have very simple things. Sometimes we have to choose between should it be cold or warm, should it be dry or a little bit humid. And as far as iron gold ink is concerned, for a chemist, the best is dry and cold.
But cold means condensation.
That's the reflex of somebody that is working. Usually when you have an air conditioning system, when you're asking 19 degrees, when outside it is something like 40 degrees, you have a very cold storage condition, but also very humid, because the system cannot follow. So in these conditions, of course, you should let the temperature go. Because if you have to make a choice between temperature and humidity, choose to limit the humidity and whatever the temperature. So you can tolerate temperature fluctuation, but keep it dry. That's the first thing to think about. And of course, if you have cold and humid environment, you should be scared, and even more if you have a humid and warm environment, and it's typically this tropical climate that provokes so many damage. So, the future.
The future, yeah.
I don't remember what you were talking. Up to you. No, it was me? It should be me.
It's you.
Okay. Okay. The future, we saw this morning that there were a lot of presentations about this analysis of documents, of pieces, and to determine the different composition. It has different top goals. It could be conservation, it could be reconstruction and understanding what was done in the past. What is sure is it is a global tendency that I see over the last 2 decades. We are making more and more analysis, we are making more and more documentation, and And there is also an increasing interest of the community of historians in the materiality of the objects.
Absolutely, because there was the large conference last year in Lyon, the largest conference of art historians, and the subject was materiality. So that field, art history, really starts to be very interested in materiality. Yes.
So, of course, there will be always improvement of your everyday work with nanomaterials, for instance, with such technology that is popping up. That will continue. It has always been the case, and it will continue. But what is really new, to my opinion, is really this tendency to go for more analysis, and in this point, the knowledge of paper conservators are very interesting for historians, and this is really a point you should work on it. I mean, you should be aware about it. Actually, the development of mobile analytical tools is exploding. So you have many choice of different tools, and
we heard even about the DNA test.
Yeah, for instance, the DNA test.
If you wash, everything is away. Yeah? So you really disturb the test.
So if we come back to the iron gold ink, today we mostly analyze the element. We mostly make X-ray analysis, but we are aware that washing, if the documents have been washed or treated, it modifies these fingerprints, so it's too difficult to go for it. So in some sense, the document loses some value. So it's always a balance, you know. And you have also to think that sooner or later, you will have probably mobile instruments that will give access to the organic part of the ink. It means the tannins, the binder. That drives even more information. And here again, if the document has been washed, these information are partly lost. And it's not only that, but it's not only spots analysis, but also mapping. And when you make mapping, sometimes you can see which area was treated with a chemical.
It's a little bit like interesting that you see every treatment with the new microscopical methods and with macro XRF. Conservation is not invisible anymore. You see every treatment. Yeah.
So it's Big Brother is watching you. So okay. But it's also a way to document what has been done on past document, because sometimes we have something we don't understand why it is in such condition, and it helps. Okay, conclusion. We take time.
Yes. Let's go back to 1898, because they had really interesting conclusions, in my opinion, or recommendations. So they all agreed, let's make a list of the most endured but most valuable European manuscripts. So list them, document them, and please let's make photos. So they all agreed they want to make photos of those to just have the condition documented. Then they said, let's stop treating for 1 whole year and have an interdisciplinary research group consisting of curators and technicians who test the treatment. And the fourth was also quite interesting. They said, hey, let's, found a European conservation workshop for manuscript conservation and restoration at the Vatican Library. That never happened. But I think it was quite a nice, it was quite a nice recommendation.
So we could make an exercise and ask ourselves, what do you think people will think about us in 100 years? That's another exercise. And you pick it, what do you think?
No, I would say in St. Gall, the curators were all male. And I hope that when they look back to our period, they would say, look, it took a whole century until women finally could claim their place in the field. What would you say, Vero?
Well, their job was maybe not too bad, considering the tools they had, you know, because probably in 100 years there will be more advancing their capacities. Oh, I hope they will be thankful for their treatment, for letting them treat in a naturally aged samples. It's not a collection really, but it's the sample I have in the lab. I hope it will be preserved. And I hope this is more for the whole community. I hope they will be grateful for the original documents that were kept in good conditions, because they will probably be bored with artificial intelligence retouch images. I hope so. So now we come to the end. This is the conclusion in 2025.
25, yeah.
We have a small surprise, and we need your participation.
Yes.
And because we prepared some revisited version of Let It Be. And I want to thank Birgit that was preparing the new text. And please sing with us.
And don't let me sing alone. And it's only once that I do that in public. Huh?
And be aware that Renate has all your names. You know, if you don't sing, you will have to pay the IADA board a drink.
Yes. Who is not singing, yeah.
So sorry, I have to do something.
I take over. And which do I have to press?
I don't know.
No. Which? What
the green one.
And please join, at least in the chorus. You all know the, yeah. Find corroded objects worn by time and history. A gentle voice is whispering, let them be. Don't erase their voices, let them age in dignity. Every crack a witness, let them be. Let them be, let them be. Oh, let them be. Whisper words of wisdom, let them be. When we find corroded objects worn by time and history, a gentle voice is whispering, let them be. And if you feel the urge to treat, remember then this conference